A. Smith joins us now. Talk a little NBA free agency, which opens up in 6 days. Let's start with the defending champs, Stephen A. The Warriors only have 5 players currently under contract. Among those names, Draymond Green and Klay Thompson. And it's assumed that KD and Steph Curry are going to opt back in. But I want to look at the supporting cast. How would you approach the contracts of an Andre Iguodala and a Sean Livingston?
Well, you'd give them, you want to give them a little money, but at the same time, years may be a different issue. It depends on how many years they want. You're Andre Iguodala and Sean Livingston, you need to be taken care of by the Golden State Warriors because they give you a level of professionalism and steadiness coming off that bench that were invaluable to the Golden State Warriors. Joe Lacob, Steve Kerr, and others throughout the organization have always raved about these individuals. And when you've got a guy like Kevin Durant willing to take a little less money just so they could be re-signed, then you go ahead and you re-sign them. You don't mind giving them the money. What you mind is committing to excessive amount of years, because if you're Andre Iguodala, for example, he may have performed well in that closeout Game 5 of the NBA Finals, but there was some dip in his game that was witnessed. You did see his game dissipating to some degree. So he's aspiring to have a 3-year deal. You may only want to give him 2. You may not want to give him a 3-year deal. These are the kind of things that you have to take into consideration. Outside of that, I don't think you want to come back with Zaza Pachulia and JaVale McGee in the middle. I think you need to do a little bit better if you're the Golden State Warriors in that regard. So they might make some modifications there, but the nucleus of their team is still going to remain intact. And it's not just with the big 4, with the Splash Brothers, KD and Draymond. It's also going to involve Iguodala and Livingston to some degree. It has to, because it would be the right thing to do.
There's plenty of question marks, too, for their neighbors to the south as well. We see Chris Paul and Blake Griffin decide that they're going to opt out of the L.A. Clippers. They're also shopping, reportedly, DeAndre Jordan, a year removed from re-signing with that team. Based on what you know right now, Stephen A., what does this Clippers team look like next year?
It's hard to say, because Doc Rivers now has the assistance of the great Jerry West to preside over the Los Angeles Clippers franchise and make modifications. CP3 has strong interest in the San Antonio Spurs. They've got to keep him. He's one of the great point guards that we've seen. You've got to find a way to keep him around. But they do need to shop Blake Griffin, because the experiment has not worked with Lob City. They get to the semifinals or the first round and they go home. That's unacceptable. And so when you have a situation like that and you have a guy like Paul George that's out there, you never know what a team like the Indiana Pacers may do, or someone else for that matter. And then you got DeAndre Jordan. You don't want to lose him, but he's a skywalker who blocks shots and rebounds and can defend. And with his salary, you can move him and get some viable pieces. I think what you'll see Doc Rivers and Jerry West do, I think somebody like Jamal Crawford might not be safe. Austin Rivers, the coach's son, he might not be safe. You might see them keep CP3 and one or the other, and Blake Griffin or DeAndre Jordan intact. If it were me, I would keep DeAndre Jordan. I would let go of Blake Griffin unless Blake Griffin was willing to play the 5 for me. But I can't keep both of them. I've got to use one of them to get a guy like a Paul George or a guy like Carmelo Anthony, preferably Paul George, of course, to come on board. And I think that's the kind of things that they're looking at right now. It remains to be seen what will happen.
All right, so while the Clippers' big 3 may be in jeopardy, there's another big 3 that I hear is drawing particular interest of you. You buying into Ice Cube's 3-on-3 league?
I am. And the reason why is very, very simple. We haven't seen these guys perform, in a half-court setting where you don't have to run up and down the court for 82 games. You're playing over the summer. It's a 3-on-3 tournament. You got the Allen Iversons, the Rashard Lewises of the world, even the Kwame Brown, believe it or not. Even he's in this tournament. You got to look at it from the standpoint, if you see these guys in a half-court set, it's individuality really, really shining. You're not running a system. There's not a bunch of picks going on all over the place, even though that will be the case. But it's one-on-one showmanship. And when you look at the fact that these guys did it on the elite level of the National Basketball Association, just because they can't do it on that level anymore doesn't mean they can't do it on 3-on-3. And I think you're going to see a lot of interest in this getting sparked. They're debuting today at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn. I think it's going to be incredibly exciting. I spoke to Allen Iverson about it several weeks ago. He's incredibly excited about it. Let's see what guys like him and others do. But I definitely think it's something that we should all give a chance to, and we should give major props to a guy like Ice Cube, who watched Kobe drop 60 and said, why can't I see more of this individuality in a half-court setting? I think it's a beautiful idea.
And I like that Ice Cube is saying, listen, this isn't going to be like an all-star game approach. We want real serious intensity from these guys so that the folks at home can get their money's worth. I'm saying watching AI cross someone again is worth the price of admission to me. We're actually going to hear from Allen Iverson, Ice Cube, and even White Chocolate a little bit later in the show. Stephen A. Smith, we're also hearing from you as well. Coming up, you're handing out awards. Thanks for joining us. See you in a bit.
No problem.
Speaking of White Chocolate, Marty Smith sits down with the Big Threes.
No.
He's more like white grits.
He is.
And we'll be live ahead of the Big Three.
We just crowned an NBA champion, perhaps you heard. And we've already had plenty of off-season drama. I know you've heard about that. Jimmy Butler reunited with his old coach in Minnesota. D'Angelo Russell shipped across the country to Brooklyn. The Sixers jumped up to take Markelle Fultz. And oh, by the way, the Cavs need a GM. Interested? So what's left? Well, Paul George is still looming as a trade target. And out west, Chris Paul and Blake Griffin have opted out. We wait to learn the fate of that Clippers core of players. Well, free agency, as we all know, Stephen A. has it marked on his calendar. It opens on July 1st. For more on the frenzy, we welcome and say a good morning to Stephen A. Smith. Hey. And Stephen A., what impact do you think the Cavaliers not yet having a GM in place will have on the team's philosophy?
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, you got to think that the philosophy is going to remain intact simply because LeBron James and Kyrie Irving are still going to be there. And so you're going to have to evolve the franchise around those individuals. If you're talking about their philosophy moving forward, that's a different matter entirely because there's no telling what's going to happen after this upcoming season. Both are expected to be there. But you know what? Until they leave, it's all about those two individuals and how they can drive you. You know that the Cavaliers know they need to make a move. And as a result, they were shopping Kevin Love. According to my sources, there were really no takers in terms of Kevin Love's salary. Otherwise, there was actually a possibility that a huge 5-team trade was going to take place where it would have ended up with Carmelo Anthony and Paul George in Cleveland. This is involving 5 teams, for crying out loud. But in the end, everything fell through because they couldn't find any takers for Kevin Love's contract. These are the kind of things that have been going on, that have been percolating over the last week or so. In the end, it's about Kyrie. It's about LeBron for 1 year. Beyond that, no one knows because Dan Gilbert elected to make the move of ridding David Griffin of GM duties for the Cleveland Cavaliers.
All right, so moving forward again, what is the biggest move you expect to see when free agency opens?
Hard to say right now. I mean, obviously it happened because Jimmy Butler ended up with the Minnesota Timberwolves. I had expected that he would be with the Boston Celtics because I thought that the Chicago Bulls would be wise enough to take a couple of first-round picks for the services of Jimmy Butler, but that wasn't something that they wanted to do, and as a result, he ends up going to Minnesota. If I had to venture to guess, it would be Paul George going somewhere. Where remains to be seen. 1 year rental in San Antonio, or possibly getting picked up by the Lakers, but instead of the Lakers waiting until next summer to grab him. Or Jerry West pulling the trigger in Indiana, taking somebody like Blake Griffin for Paul George's services, thinking that they could convince him to stay in L.A. with them instead of going to the Los Angeles Lakers next summer. Nobody knows what that's going to be. But right now, if you had to pick one blockbuster move involving a star, it seems almost certain that Paul George won't remain an Indiana Pacer through the summer. They know they need to get rid of him because he blindsided them by telling everybody publicly that he intends to depart after the 2018 season.
No question, the NBA never sleeps, and neither do you, Stephen A. Smith. Thanks for waking up with us on SportsCenter.
MLB team to lose 50 games this season. See, they're having as much trouble winning as I am talking about them losing. The last time Giants were the first team to 50 losses was 41 years ago when they started 33-50 and finished 74-88, finishing 4th in the NL West.
Time now to welcome in our baseball insider, Buster Olney, as we do each and every Sunday. And Buster, it's really a tradition taking on the country right now, the Buster number. What is it for this week?
Matt, the number this week is 307. That's the difference in the winning percentage between the Dodgers at 658 and the Giants at 351. And according to the Elias Sports Bureau, it's the biggest difference in favor of the Dodgers over the Giants when both teams have played at least 70 games in the history of these two franchises. think about that. It says a lot where these two teams are right now.
Yeah, we're talking about the gap in standings, especially in the National League. How is this impacting teams when you've got so many teams up at a high level and then some that are near the bottom?
Well, in particular with the Giants, look, the writing is on the wall at this point. They are 27-50. They have the worst record in baseball. They're 23.5 games out of first place in the National League West, which frees them up to trade some of their potential assets. Some teams are going to be interested in Eduardo Nunez, although he just went on the disabled list. A really interesting guy to watch is Johnny Cueto. Pitched a great game against the Mets on Saturday. He's 5-7, 4.20 ERA, but the wild card here is he can opt out of his contract at the end of the year, and that's why a lot of teams are telling the Giants, look, if we're going to make a deal for him, it's going to be as a rental, not someone who has 3 years left on his contract.
Yeah, Johnny Cueto was one of those players the Giants brought in a couple of years ago to perhaps goose a playoff run.